You remember the exact moment, not because it was loud, but because it was precise. A small comment delivered casually. A smirk that lingered half a second too long. A nickname that wasn't meant to be cruel, just dismissive enough to shrink you in front of everyone else. They didn't yell, they didn't attack, they laughed. And in that laugh, they decided who you were. They called you a joke. It wasn't the word itself that stayed with you, it was the agreement in the room. The subtle shift in posture, the way eyes avoided yours afterward, as if the label had already settled into place. You felt it, the reduction, as if your potential had been compressed into something harmless, something safe to mock. You smiled back then, pretended it didn't reach you. But it did. What they didn't notice was what happened next. Something went quiet inside you. Not broken, not defeated, just observing. Stopped explaining. Stopped trying to rewrite their perception in real time. And lately, when they look at you, there's hesitation. The jokes don't land the same. The laughter sounds thinner. They can feel something changing. You're not reacting the way you used to. You're not filling the silence for them anymore. The version of you standing here now isn't the same one they labeled that day. The laugh still echoes. But it doesn't define you anymore. Being underestimated doesn't bruise you all at once. It reshapes you slowly. After that moment, you started noticing the pattern. The way your ideas were skimmed over. The way your ambition sounded cute to them. The way they spoke about your future like it was a phase you'd eventually outgrow. It wasn't just words. It was dismissal. It was being present but not fully seen. Heard but not fully considered. They didn't attack your character. They minimized your capacity. And that kind of reduction does something subtle to the mind. You begin questioning your instincts. You measure your tone. You soften your edges so you don't seem delusional for believing in something bigger. Isolation follows quietly. Not because you are alone, but because you feel misread. There's a difference. You can sit in a room full of people and still feel like no one is actually perceiving you correctly. They interact with a simplified version of you. A smaller outline, a safer interpretation. The temptation is strong in that phase. To shrink further, to accept the role, to laugh at yourself before anyone else can. Survival sometimes looks like self-reduction. Most people stay there. Most people internalize the label. They adjust their expectations to match what others can comfortably digest. They return to familiar limits because proving others wrong feels heavier than agreeing with them. But you didn't. Something in you resisted. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a quiet refusal to fully collapse into the identity they handed you. You questioned yourself. Yes, you doubted. You replayed conversations in your head. But beneath the uncertainty, there was friction. And friction creates heat. That heat didn't explode outward. It turned inward, quiet, controlled. That's when the resistance began. Then came the phase they completely misunderstood. You got quieter, not in a defeated way, not in the way someone fades. You just stopped volunteering pieces of yourself to people who had already decided what you were worth. You stopped over-explaining your goals. Stopped defending your ambition. Stopped reacting to subtle disrespect disguised as humor. You observe more. You spoke less. They thought you gave up. From the outside, it looked like acceptance. Like you finally understood your place. The jokes slowed down because you weren't resisting anymore. The debates disappeared because you weren't engaging. To them, your silence meant surrender. They thought you accepted your role. But what they were witnessing wasn't submission. It was recalibration. When you stopped performing for their understanding, you had more time to understand yourself. You started noticing your patterns, where you sought validation, where you reacted too quickly, where your emotions leaked control. That awareness became discipline you built privately. Skills sharpened in isolation feel different. There's no applause attached to the process. No external encouragement. Just repetition, correction, adjustment. You refined your thinking, strengthened your habits, strengthened your body, strengthened your restraint. You became harder to read, and that's when silence becomes dangerous. Because when someone loud goes quiet, people assume they're losing. But when someone observant goes quiet, they're gathering leverage. You weren't retreating, you were consolidating. Every moment you didn't respond emotionally was a rep. Every time you chose not to argue was control gained. This wasn't your final form. You felt it before you could articulate it. The old impulse to defend yourself started dissolving. In its place was something steadier. You didn't need to correct their perception in real time anymore. You were building something that would correct it permanently. They saw distance, you felt direction. And slowly, that quiet resistance turned into something intentional. The real battle was never with them. It was with the voice that started to sound like them inside your own head. When everything went quiet externally, the internal noise got louder. Doubt doesn't disappear just because you choose silence. It waits. It asks sharper questions in the dark. What if they were right? What if you overestimated yourself? What if the laughter was simply honesty delivered without comfort? Old you wanted validation. You imagined the moment they'd finally admit they misjudged you. You rehearsed future conversations where your success would speak for itself, and their expressions would shift from amusement to respect. But another part of you was evolving. New you wanted leverage, old you wanted applause. New you wanted control over your reactions, over your habits, over the narrative playing in your own mind. There were nights you couldn't sleep because your thoughts wouldn't slow down. You replayed mistakes in high definition. You dissected your weaknesses without mercy. Sometimes it felt obsessive. You weren't just trying to improve. You were trying to rebuild. That process isn't glamorous. It feels like losing parts of yourself. The parts that needed approval. The parts that performed for acceptance. The parts that rushed to be understood. That's ego death in its quietest form. You start noticing how much of your identity was constructed around being seen a certain way. When that external mirror cracks, you're forced to ask a harder question. Who are you without their reaction? Detaching from approval feels like withdrawal. Your mind keeps reaching for it. You have to consciously pull it back, again and again. It's uncomfortable. It feels unnatural at first, like you're denying a basic instinct. But something stabilizes over time. The need to impress weakens. The need to argue dissolves. You begin making decisions that no one claps for. You start respecting yourself in private. That changes your posture in public without you trying. The war shifts. It's no longer about proving them wrong. It's about proving yourself disciplined, consistent, controlled. And when you win against your own doubt, even temporarily, something clicks. Power isn't volume, it's self-command. There wasn't a dramatic moment. No announcement, no visible breakthrough. It was quieter than that. One day you realized you hadn't imagined their reaction in a while. You hadn't pictured their faces when you finally made it. You hadn't rehearsed a perfectly measured response for the next time someone tried to reduce you. The mental courtroom where you used to defend yourself went silent, and that silence felt clean. You stopped needing the comeback moment. The cinematic reversal where everyone suddenly understands who you are. You stopped craving the shock in their eyes, the apology. The validation, recognition became optional. That shift changes everything, because attention is currency. And for a long time, even in your discipline, you were still spending yours on them. You were improving with an audience in mind. You were evolving with witnesses in your imagination. Now you build without spectators. You work without narrating your progress. You achieve without scanning the room to see who noticed. You stopped checking whether your growth made anyone uncomfortable or impressed. You detached from their perception completely. And when you do that, something stabilizes inside you. Your decisions get cleaner, your focus sharpens. You don't hesitate as much. You don't dilute your ambition to make it digestible. You don't over-explain your silence. You're operating from somewhere deeper now. It's not anger, it's not resentment. It's grounded, controlled, intentional. You move because it aligns with your standard, not because it contradicts their expectations. That's the real turning point, when your growth is no longer a reaction. And that's when the external world starts responding differently. Not because you demanded respect, not because you confronted anyone, but because when you stop chasing attention, your presence changes, and people feel it before they understand it. It doesn't happen all at once. The shift is subtle, almost unnoticeable at first. A different tone in their voice, fewer jokes at your expense, more questions about what you've been working on. Curiosity where there used to be certainty. They can't explain it. You don't look drastically different. You're not louder. You're not trying to command attention. But something about you feels less accessible, less available for casual dismissal. You don't react the same. The comments that once pulled a response from you now land on still water. No ripple, no performance. You listen. You answer if necessary. You move on. And that restraint unsettles people more than any argument ever could. You don't chase the same opportunities, conversations, approval. You're no longer leaning forward, trying to be included. You're grounded, selective. If something aligns, you step in. If it doesn't, you step back without explanation. That's when the dynamic flips, not in a dramatic, cinematic way. There's no public apology, no grand acknowledgement of misjudgment. It's quieter than that. They start choosing their words more carefully. They start watching you a little longer. They start recalibrating their assumptions. Respect grows in the space where predictability used to be. And the most powerful part? You don't gloat. You don't remind them of what they said. You don't bring up the past. You don't need to, because this was never about humiliation in reverse. It was about elevation in silence. Calm dominance isn't loud. It's steady. You're no longer trying to win moments. You're building something bigger than moments. And as their behavior shifts, you feel something even more important solidifying inside you. Stability, not because they changed, but because you did. Being called a joke felt like humiliation at first. Now you see it for what it really was, strategic invisibility. When people underestimate you, they stop guarding themselves. They reveal more than they realize. Their habits, their weaknesses, their insecurities disguised as confidence. While they were certain about who you were, they stopped questioning who they were, and you were watching, While they performed, you practiced. While they talked, you built. While they tried to be seen, you focused on becoming solid. Underestimation is a strange advantage. It removes pressure. No one expects excellence from someone they've already categorized as average. No one prepares for the quiet one to outgrow the room. That gave you space. Space to fail privately. Space to refine without scrutiny. Space to strengthen without commentary. Most people crave immediate validation. They want visible progress. They want applause during the process. And when it doesn't come, they retreat. They shrink back to what's familiar because comfort feels safer than being misunderstood. Most people go back. You tolerated the misjudgment longer than your ego wanted to. You resisted the urge to announce your improvements. You allowed them to believe the narrative, even as you were rewriting it in real time. That requires a different kind of patience. Underestimated people move differently. They calculate more. They observe patterns. They understand that being overlooked is temporary, but mastery is permanent. They don't waste energy correcting assumptions. They invest it in becoming undeniable. And when the results eventually surface, they feel inevitable. Looking back, the label they gave you wasn't a curse. It was cover. It shielded your growth from interference. It filtered out distraction. It forced you to rely on internal standards instead of external applause. Not everyone survives that phase. Some become bitter. Some become loud. Some burn out trying to prove a point. You chose something rarer. You chose transformation. Pain is common. Refinement is not. Almost everyone gets underestimated at some point. Almost everyone feels the sting of dismissal, the isolation of being misread. But what happens next is where the separation begins. Some people let the pain rot. They replay it until it becomes resentment. They build identities around being wronged. That's bitterness. It looks like strength on the surface. It sounds sharp. It feels intense. But it's reactive. It's still controlled by the original wound. What you chose was different. You metabolized it. Instead of asking, how do I make them regret it? You eventually started asking, how do I make this useful? That question changes the trajectory of a life. Revenge seeks a reaction. Evolution seeks elevation. This version of you is harder to access. You don't respond, you calculate. You don't chase closure. You build capacity. You don't need to be louder than before. You need to be steadier. Stronger in ways that don't require announcement. That kind of transformation is rare because it's uncomfortable. It requires swallowing your pride. It requires letting go of the fantasy where everyone admits they were wrong. It requires patience. When your ego wants immediacy, most people won't endure that. They want relief, not reconstruction. They want validation, not discipline. They want the spotlight, not the solitude. You accepted the solitude, not because you enjoyed it, but because you understood something deeper was forming there. A thicker skin, a sharper mind, a nervous system that doesn't spike at every opinion. You're not superior to anyone. You're forged. Forged people don't talk about heat. They carry its imprint. They move with a certain restraint because they've already survived their own internal collapse and rebuild. And once you reach this stage, the question changes again. It's no longer about who doubted you, it's about who you're becoming next. You never set out to become unforgettable. You set out to become undeniable. There's a difference. Loud success demands attention. It announces itself. It pushes into rooms and waits for applause. But what you built was quieter than that. It grew without spectacle. It's strengthened without commentary. And now, when your name comes up, it doesn't trigger laughter. It triggers pause. Your name carries weight because it survived ridicule. It passed through dismissal and didn't dissolve. That history gives it density. People sense it, even if they can't articulate why. Your reputation builds because you stop defending it. You no longer rush to correct misunderstandings. You no longer explain your vision to people committed to small interpretations. The work speaks in a tone you don't have to raise. You don't chase rooms anymore. Rubums adjust when you enter. Not because you demand it, not because you posture, but because your presence isn't reaching anymore. It's grounded, measured, certain. There's a gravitational quality to someone who doesn't need approval to function. That's what they feel now. And the irony is quiet. The same people who once reduced you to a joke now choose their words more carefully. Not out of fear, out of recognition. Something solid formed where something fragile used to be. But this isn't the peak. It's proof of concept. And what you build from here will determine how permanent that weight becomes. You don't hate them. Hate would mean they still control something in you. They don't. You don't thank them either. This wasn't a gift. It was friction. And friction only matters if you choose to press against it. You simply outgrew them, outgrew the room, outgrew the version of yourself that needed their approval, outgrew the impulse to prove, to argue, to perform. What replaced it is quieter, heavier, controlled. They called you a joke. Now you're the name they say carefully. Not because you demanded respect, not because you chased revenge, but because you rebuilt yourself in silence and let time reveal the difference. And the most powerful part? You're not finished. This isn't your peak, it's your baseline. What once felt impossible is now standard. What once required effort now feels natural. And from this level, your next evolution won't be about escaping laughter. It will be about expanding influence.